first of all, can you please introduce yourself and also to explain us when was the Irish election? I think it was this weekend, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, Enzo and Davide. I appreciate it, lads. Basically, my name's Yan Mac Oireachtaigh, as a lot of you will know, and I'm in charge of the National Party Youth Wing, Óige Náisiúnach, and I was also the Dublin South West candidate for the National Party in the recent elections just gone. As you may remember, it was on the 29th. That was polling day. And then we had the count days on the Saturday and the Sunday. I was also the candidate in the South Dublin County Council local elections that we had during the summer. And that's kind of my background. I got involved in 2019. That's when I first got involved in politics. And just ever since then, it's kind of just I've been building up, and now I'm running as a candidate in 2024. Do you know what I mean? So that's my background. That's who I am. There's other bits and bobs, but that's not really important for this political lecture.
Okay, super. So you was also running for this election. In which part of Ireland you was candidate?
So I ran in Dublin South West, which covers the areas of Tallaght, most of Tallaght, about 90% of it, because recently there was a boundary poll change where they removed parts of Tallaght Fettercairn from the constituency, which was a bit of a letdown because Tallaght Fettercairn, I actually have a lot of support there from locals. That was obvious from the local elections. I got 5.5% in Tallaght South, and a lot of that vote share came out of Tallaght Fettercairn. So that was, to my dismay, it was removed from the constituency. But Dublin South West is basically most of Tallaght, Rathfarnham, Firhouse. These are all suburbs of Dublin, basically. Some are a bit more well off, like Rathfarnham Temple Ogue is a local electoral area that's in Dublin South West, and that's actually like an upper middle class type of area. And then you have Ferris Barnabrina, which is a middle class area, and then Tallaght South and Tallaght Central, which is like lower middle class, working class type areas. And that's where I was. So I was in the suburbs I ran in the suburbs of Dublin.
Okay, good. Perfect.
What is your analysis of the election, and also if we can get deeper inside the result? Everyone here maybe know that immigration was a big topic, so there was also the confidence that maybe could propel the right, but at the end the result was not so appealing to the right. So what is your analysis of the election and looking deeper the results?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question, Davide. Like when you look, I know on a surface level, particularly when you're from the continent, it looks like a very poor and pathetic result. But you have to remember, in Ireland, things are a bit different here. Ireland was a very homogenous country up until very recently, where we suffered like mass immigration very quickly within 2 decades. It's very important. That's very important to know, because in Ireland, like in 2020, we had a general election, and the National Party, that's when we first fielded. For example, the National Party we ran a number of candidates all across the country, and in Dublin South West, we ran a candidate at the time. The candidate got 0.75% of the first preference votes, which equated to about 500 first preference votes. In 2024, I ran in Dublin South West, and we tripled that result. We got 1,450 first preference votes, which equates to 2.2% of the Dublin South West vote share. In general, like in 2020, all of the nationalist parties put together, they polled at 0.93%, less than 1%. But in 2024, all the nationalist parties together, they polled at an average of 2.68%. That is a massive increase. We're looking at 3-fold increases in almost every constituency ran on average. Some constituencies like Dublin Northwest are absolute gold mines, where the nationalist candidates that ran, or the perceived nationalist candidates at least that ran, they received something mad like nearly 10%. alone. And 10%, if one candidate received 10%, like that's straight to the Dáil. Like that's straight. That's a seat straight into Parliament, our Parliament called the Dáil. And so it's very important that we just have to realise that a lot of Irish people, see, we have like this civil war politics that's been going on for hundreds of years, and Sinn Féin, the fake nationalist party, we'll call them, they're leftists. They kind of broke that in 2020, which I think has helped, but their support has also fallen significantly. And that is literally simply because of immigration. The immigration issue has absolutely obliterated the Sinn Féin support. Like, their candidate, Sean Crowe, in my constituency, Dublin South West, he received 29% of the first preference votes, which is crazy. Like, that's crazy good result. But Sean Crowe, this election, I believe, he only received 12% of the first preference votes, and his running mate, Niamh Whelan, she only received 6% of the first preference votes, which is a total of 18%. That's a far cry from 29%. And you're seeing this sort of shift in attitudes. It's just the shift hasn't been big enough, and it hasn't been, well, it's actually been very big, really, but it just hasn't been concentrated. A lot of parties in Europe, see, their base is very concentrated to the one organisation. But in Ireland, there's loads of political parties, for one, right? There's a new political party starting every other day, and it's just getting a bit mad. And you also there's like a lot of nationalist parties that are just competing for the same vote share, which is actually still significantly low. It's too low for the amount of parties that are competing, which is why the National Party, after the local elections, it was evident that the vote splitting was killing chances of seats in an absolute multitude of local electoral areas. So that's why we formed with our partners in the Irish People and the Ireland First, which are two other nationalist parties, and we decided to come together with other independent candidates to form the National Alliance to mitigate as much as possible vote splitting. Because right now, what's hampering the nationalist right in Ireland is a severe case of vote splitting. It's just it's a real issue that we're facing. Now, in the future, like as time goes on, obviously it won't be as important, but it's still like to get that foot in the door, which is what we need to do. We need to get a foot in the door, and to do that, we need to coalesce around the one organisation. And I think that the National Alliance is that perfect umbrella group, which it's a right-wing nationalist umbrella group that basically prevents further, or as much as possible, the vote splitting issue that we're facing at the minute. So I know that from your perspective, the results look lackluster. It's like, wow, like all these protests, and like for what? For this? But when I break down the numbers, because I have like my score sheets from 2020, well, not me, but Philip's score sheets from 2020, and I'm comparing it to the results of 2024, and you're looking at massive increases, particularly in certain areas. Like one of the areas that Phil seriously overperformed in 2020 was the Tala Old Bawn area polling station, and he got 1.4%, which was a double, which was crazy. But when you look at in 2024, like some of the areas in Tala South at polling stations, I was polling at 6%, 5%, which is a significant increase on my 2.2% I received in the general election. So, like, there is the mood in Ireland is changing. There's also another factor that people have to remember, and I think it was Keith Woods who was saying it on one of his podcasts, and this was a very, very good point to make, is that a lot of, particularly boomers in Ireland, like that kind of 50 plus demographic we have in Ireland, a lot of them, see, they might have heard of the likes of the National Alliance and the National Party, but they want to keep things stable, you know, and for them stability is voting for Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. So a lot of people in Ireland who have like very anti-immigration views, they're actually they keep voting the same people over and over again. And a lot of boomers particularly think that, for example, Fine Gael is the best party to deal with the immigration crisis when they're the ones that have opened the floodgates. And that's another big important factor, that just because the sentiment of anti-immigration is so high in Ireland, it's not translating to votes because people are still clinging on to that, like, you know, this is my football team, this is my team, and I'm not ready to vote for this new party that just came out of the woodwork. Because to them, like, we don't get as much. I know I was on TG Cahir the day before the election, which is the Irish national broadcaster that we have here on the telly, but at the same time, like, we're not getting the same media because of the, what's it called, the cordon sanitaire type thing that we have in Ireland. Particularly, is really bad in Ireland. You can't, like, nobody can really get on to the mainstream medias to push their ideas. There's a total chokehold around it by the state in particular. So that's another big obstacle that we're facing. But really, like, when you break down the numbers again, I mean, it's very promising. If all the nationalist parties were won in the 2024 general election, we'd be the 10th biggest party with 2.68% of the vote share, which is quite significant. It's very significant in Ireland in particular because the 2% mark is when you receive state funding. So if you fall under 2%, you don't actually receive any state funding. But if you hit 2% or more, that's when you start receiving grants from the state to function as a, like, I'm not going to say professional political party, because I find that you don't need that funding to be a professional like political party. But at the same time, that funding is a massive bonus. It's a huge bonus, particularly for campaigns, for optics sake. Like, it really helps. So I'm actually quite positive with the results. I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the other organisations in Ireland, and we're going to work towards that with our partners in Irish People and Ireland First and the other various independents. We're going to work towards making sure that we can coalesce more and more into a single fighting force to take on the regime and to take on the immigration pushers. And I do think that it is promising. Like, the results are promising. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. And at the end of the day, politics, elections, it's not a sprint. Like, this is a marathon. This is a marathon, and you need to have the discipline, you need to have the confidence and the optics to just keep pushing forward, no matter what. Like, you're not a loser until you've given up, you know?
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So the next question is there a party which with your political party could make an alliance or not for the future?
Right, so I kind of actually answered that one there. Like, I was talking about the National Alliance and what that is. The National Alliance is basically an umbrella. It's like a voting pact sort of thing, where you have multiple organisations in the one. You have the nationalist political party, the Irish People, Ireland First, and the National Party, and then various independent candidates all under the one umbrella to prevent that issue that we talked about of vote splitting. And it's really positive what's going on, to be honest. Like, there's a lot of things planned. It was put together in August of this year, like straight after the local elections, because that's when we were like, oh God, hold on, like, we missed out on a load of seats here simply because of vote splitting, because the transfers. See, Ireland has a system of single transferable vote, so you have to kind of see it as there's multiple rounds and each round your vote can be transferred on if you're eliminated. So depending on how the eliminations go per count, which is like a round, it usually just eliminates the bottom candidate, and then their votes are redistributed to all the other candidates, and so on and so forth. And what we noticed that like, there's never going to be a 100% transfer rate, but we noticed that the transfer rates just weren't there. A lot of the transfers that were going to nationalist candidates that were supposed to go, that we would have thought would have gone to nationalist candidates within the local electoral area, were actually being split off to the likes of People Before Profit, which is a left-wing Trotskyist party. And they were receiving transfers from nationalist candidates. So that's why we need to mitigate the vote splitting, because it'll literally, with the way things have gone, it'll actually propel a lot of left-wing candidates if we keep going down the path of vote splitting. And this, I'm going to hammer this away, and because I can see all the listeners now, like I'm hammering it away, like vote splitting is going to be the downfall, and we need to prevent that from happening. Now, it's not the end of the world, like it's just going to make our job getting into power and getting one foot in the door that much harder. So that's why I think that the National Alliance is a very, very positive, thing that's happened. And it was put together in August, and so far it's going very well. What we are going to have is, in due course, we're going to have more conferences together as one and working together. And it's just going to be very cool and very epic. So, yup.
Thank you. Next question. So for you, what is the three most important points for Ireland in politics?
Well, in my opinion, I think that obviously I'm going to say mass immigration. Mass immigration literally threatens the very existence of our race of people. Like, if mass immigration continues from anywhere, from any country, from any part of the world, it will replace the native Irish race in Ireland with foreigners. And that is just not something that we can have at all, right? And that's my number one issue, of course. And I think it's the number one issue of a lot of people that are listening, and a lot of other nationalists and right-wing figures across Europe. Another one, of course, is housing. And the issue of housing in Ireland is particularly grim compared to other countries, because obviously we have mass immigration. Ireland's fairly small, and the supply and demand question is something that's completely ignored by a lot of our talking heads, our pundits, and the regime. The regime completely ignores the issues of supply and demand. For them, it's all about supply. They're like, we need to build so-and-so amount of houses. We need to build something like 45,000 houses per quarter, or whatever the figures are. And I'm just like, like in my area, in Dublin Southwest, I'm looking around me and they're building apartments everywhere. And I mean absolutely everywhere. When I was younger, and that wasn't very long ago, we're only talking like 5-6 years ago when I was younger. I lived nearly up in the mountains, nearly, where there was farms and there was fields everywhere, and just my estate was like on its own. Now, all around my estate is becoming built up into concrete jungles. And when I mean like a concrete jungle, like these are fairly big apartment complexes, and when you walk around these, it's chock-a-block full of foreigners. There's like, we're talking no Irish people live in these complexes. It's like 90% foreign at the least, and they're building them everywhere. So when I look at like supply and demand, they're like, oh no, we need to build more. It's like, no, like we're not paving over. Like, that is unacceptable that we have to pave over our landscape, our countryside, to accommodate blow-ins, right? That's just bang out of order, and we're not having that. The issue is supply and demand, particularly demand. When you're bringing in the entire third world, like, of course you're going to have to build gaffs everywhere, like that's obviously, if that's what's happening. So what we propose is that we implement strict remigration policies, where we can remigrate a lot of these people who have blown into the country and who have absolutely no need to be here, and to send them back on their very merry way. So obviously the issue of supply and demand for housing is a big one, because housing is affecting absolutely everything. It's affecting our birth rates. It's affecting emigration, because Ireland has a long history of emigration, where young Irish people leave the country, and that's starting to kick up again. And that is particularly grim, because that's going to facilitate and accelerate our replacement in our own homeland. So the housing issue is the second biggest issue, and it's something that has to be dealt with like very quickly, or we will lose a generation. And I think we're already losing a generation, and now we're at the risk of losing a second generation if things continue on the way they are, which is just, again, bang out of order, and we will put a stop to that. The third is obviously it's the economy, stupid. You know, I mean, like, a lot of issues are economic related, and I think that we are working on more economic policies and what, like, that's all in the works, that's all being done. But the economy is something that's always overlooked, and I think that if you're like an identitarian or whatever, like, keeping an eye on the economy and proposing nationalist economic policies that work is a major benefit to any movement, and particularly a political party. So in the MP, we're working, and with the Nationalise, our partners, we want to work on solid nationalist, pro-Irish, pro-Ireland economic policies that will benefit the nation. And of course, by the nation, we mean the people, the Irish people. Because right now, Irish people are treated as second-class citizens in our own homeland. And that is just bang out of order. We just can't be having that at all. And that's why those are my mine three main issues that we're faced with. So number one, mass immigration. Number two, housing supply and demand. And number three, the economy. Nationalist economics is what's needed, and it's something that we need to bang home. And yeah, I hope that answered your question, Enzo.
Thank you, Jan. I want to address another question for you. It's what future you see for Ireland, and also regarding the future, the big question of reunification of Ireland. So what the stance and what you see also in the landscape for the future.
Thanks, Davide. Yeah, well, listen. In regards to, I'm actually fairly white-pilled. Like, I don't know about you lads, but I've been chugging down those white pills like 90. And I think that with the way things have gone so far, like, I joined the party in 2019, right? And I remember knocking on doors during the campaign in 2020. Like, I remember doing that. And I remember people were so switched off. They were so switched off. Very rarely would you meet a guy who was like, oh yeah, 100% a massive, like, people were very nice and positive during the 2020 election campaign, and they kind of were like, oh yeah, no, I agree with you, but they like didn't really care. Now, like, I've witnessed it with my own eyes, and so have all our canvassers, and I'm sure canvassers in other parties. But when you knock on the doors now, like, I have a situation where I'm walking around and, like, literally, I was coming home from work, and on the way out of work, like, those people literally that were just there, and they were like, oh, you're Jan, you're the guy in the posters, you're the National Party guy. And I was like, yeah, no, I am. So had a chat with them. And it's just, there's a huge, maybe not like awakening, but there is that sort of, like, there's a different vibe to the way politics has gone. And I think everyone can feel it. And it's noticeable on the doors. Like, when you talk to real people knocking on doors, like, I know, like, I don't pay much heed to the internet, to TikTok and all that crap. What I like to do is I enjoy talking to real people on the doors, because that's where you're going to find some truths. You're going to find some real truths. And talking to people on the doors, like, they're recognizing us. So for the future of Ireland, I'm very white-pilled. I'm very positive. I think that although, like, demographics is a ticking time bomb, and demographics is always destiny, the 6 counties have proven that, I think that we have a real opportunity to make some serious change in the next decade. And that's really positive. Like, that's really good. I mean, most political parties across the continent, it's taken them years to achieve what a lot of things that we've done in a very short amount of time. Like, you have to realize that the time on the continent where movements have had like 15, 20, 30 years to grow, like, we've had to cram that in the space of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We've had to grow very quickly at a very short amount of time to keep up with the rapid transformation of Ireland, as well as the rapid transformation of the political scene on the continent. So that's my take. I'm very positive about the future. I think that there's some serious ground to be made. If we can keep going on the way, on the trend that we are right now, like, we're talking, there's going to be some serious change very soon. Hopefully by the next election cycle, if not the next one, definitely the one after that. So in the next 10 years. In regards to a united Ireland, Of course, I support 32 county national republic, absolutely. But I find that if people seriously think that Sinn Féin's the one to do it, I mean, they're barking up the wrong tree. Sinn Féin's just not the one that's going to do it. They would want that. They're fully supportive of the replacement of the Irish people in their own homeland. So I don't know. It's a bit very funny that they're so so-called nationalistic on the 32 county question. I'm not sure what the future holds. I think that with the way things have gone, like, I know that there was like these historic landmark victories for the so-called nationalists up in the 6 counties, but what's very noticeable is that the reason why that happened is because of all the scandals that have been going on within the DUP, which is kind of like the unionist party that's up there, the big one that's up there. And there was a lot of scandals, like paedophilia scandals, sex scandals, all that sort of crap was going on. And a lot of the support has kind of like splintered. So some of the more hardline loyalist groups have kind of pushed on towards like groups like TUV, who are now polling like way bigger than they've ever polled before. And then you have the more kind of liberal unionist types that have pushed on to the other parties, like UUP, I believe, is one. And so, like, nothing has really changed up there except for the kind of how Brexit really affected the 6 counties in particular, because you had a lot of the loyalists really kicked up a fuss. And like, I don't know much about what goes on up there, particularly in regards to the loyalist communities, but I believe that they were very unhappy with how Brexit went on and how the likes of the DUP, their party, handled it. So they kind of broke ranks from it, and you kind of have just this collapse in DUP support, which is why you have the Sinn Féin party up there is so strong. But it's like, realistically, nothing's really changed. I mean, they're still it's still very 50-50, and it's not going to change for a while. So the only thing that's changing is mass immigration from the whole world really going into the 6 counties is increasing fairly rapidly, just not as rapid as the 26 counties. And I do believe, though, that we will see in the coming years a united Ireland. I think it's inevitable that it happens. You just look at the demographics and the way things have gone since the partition of Ireland in the 1920s, and you can kind of just see this like gravitation towards a united Ireland, and I just think it's absolutely inevitable. And loyalists and unionists can see them cope about that, but it's just facts. So that's my take on the united Ireland question. That's kind of my opinions, my analysis on what's going on. So yeah.
Thank you so much.